Thank you very much. That's a very warm and kind welcome. Um, it was quite delightful watching as people were streaming in, but I have to be honest, I feel a little sad that we can't twist the camera around so that I can get a sense of your faces. But anyway, my greetings to you all. And as is, I guess, part of Australia's process to try and think about recognition of our traditional owners of country throughout Australia, I'd like to acknowledge that continuing connection to the lands, waters, and communities. I'm joining you from the lands of the Barramudigal people of the Darug Nation, and I'd like to pay my respects to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures, to elders past and present, as they were the original innovators and scientists of these lands. So just a little bit of an overview about where I'd like us to spend the little bit of time that we have together is to maybe just give you a little bit of an idea of collaborative research infrastructure within Australia and the program that enables Microscopy Australia to exist. A little bit about Microscopy Australia itself, and then I guess an Australian perspective on how we work with global bioimaging and perhaps more particularly some of the things that I've actually been involved in personally. So with that, let's take a little look at national research infrastructure. So within Australia, we have an approach that thinks about what is kind of institutional research infrastructure, national research infrastructure, and what we call global or landmark research infrastructure, which might be something like an SKA or a square kilometre array. And so Microscopy Australia is sitting within that national research infrastructure definition, where we're thinking about assets and equipment, facilities, services, and that expertise that's going to enable Australian research and innovation. And there's a particular federal government, national government program called the National Collaborative Research Infrastructure Strategy that was established back in 2006. And so every 5 years, our government goes through a road mapping process, which is similar to ESFRI in Europe, where, of course, that's at a regional level. This is at a national scale, where they look at what are some of those coming priorities. And so we're just about to go through that process as they're starting consultations for the new roadmap that will be released for 2026. So in terms of there's a real broad range of functions that are delivered across more than 25 projects within that NCRIS program. And so they will do things like observation and monitoring, both within oceans and also terrestrial, computing and modelling, management of data sets and nationally significant data collections, fabrication and manufacturing, and of course, Microscopy Australia that sits within the measurement and characterisation functions. So let's talk a little bit more about Microscopy Australia itself. So the way Microscopy Australia is delivered is a consortium of open access facilities, and that is based at 9 different universities around Australia. And it's really that combination of placing those instruments where Australia might not need a number of them. We might be able, in terms of capacity and demand, but we want to make sure that wherever they are placed, they are then available to all Australian researchers, whether they're coming from our institutions, medical research institutes, from government, and also from industry. And so that's where we have established those 9 facilities. But we also have connections to another 9 linked laboratories or affiliated groups where, and we'll come back to this when we talk about global bioimaging, where part of the value is that networking and collaboration and professional development for the staff that are in those affiliated labs. So we do try and think a fair bit, and I guess unlike maybe some of the technical talks that you've already experienced, I was going to focus a little bit more on that coordination and collaboration aspect. So we do think about ways to try and communicate the importance of microscopy and bioimaging to both our funders, but also to our researchers. And so some of the way that we do that is try and take some of the micrographs, some of the images from our instruments, think about how to position them both in different techniques so that people can understand the breadth of the various techniques that we offer, but also the scales with which they're able to use those. So whether that's looking at atoms or proteins, right the way up through to animal skeletons. And I think that's got some synergies with Euro-BioImaging as well. So in terms of how we think about our planning, we do have some priorities, and that's because within Microscopy Australia, we're really passionate that that structural knowledge and understanding that you can reveal through a microscope is really a thread that weaves together our knowledge creation. And we are firm believers that that's how you can underpin innovation, you can validate models and unlock new understanding. So whether that's for us, thinking about atomic arrangements in quantum devices, whether it's sustainable biomaterials, or whether it's thinking about critical minerals. And so understanding atomic and molecular scales is how we see there's a contribution into the future. So we do that then thinking about these four priority areas within our strategic plan, which is still about supporting excellent research and producing quality data. It is about innovation and translation. It is about that advanced instruments, but it's also about that expert workforce. And so when we're thinking about the ways that we are supporting our staff and supporting our researchers, we think about it with those different priorities in mind. So just maybe a little bit of context in terms of the user communities that we're supporting. So we have over 250 instruments. In fact, I think it's now probably over 300 instruments, around about 130 staff that are in those 9 facilities, and supporting well over 3,500 users now as well. We've seen some pretty significant increases after the pandemic of researchers that have been coming through our facilities. One thing that I guess might be a little bit different for some of the Euro-BioImaging nodes is we do get quite a broad range in our research community between the geosciences and environmental scientists, in that physical and material sciences, which is about half of our research community, but definitely with a very significant biological and medical research community that use our facilities as well. I will come back to my scope. It is one of those things that I think at a national level has been a real success story for Microscopy Australia, and that has around about 50,000 users per year. And in terms of that academic support that we provide, there's around about 1,500 publications across those 9 institutions that are enabled by our facilities. So I did say I wanted to touch a little bit as well on the Australian context. So Australia does have a way of having a sort of policy or priority statement regarding science and research. And this was actually redeveloped just last year and released. And what they really wanted to try and capture was this sort of this overlapping and I guess connected nature of some of the challenges and outcomes that are relevant for Australia. And so that's how they identified those 5 priorities. And you will see that there is a real focus on trying to have that recognition of First Nations knowledge systems within a science and research framework. But still, it is about focusing on secure and resilient nation, net zero, healthy and thriving communities, and of course, protecting and restoring the environment. And I guess one of the reasons I wanted to mention that is because for Microscopy Australia, we then try and think similarly about how can we then communicate where the relevance is for each of those national priorities across different application areas or different research communities that we're supporting. So, for example, under that first one with a net zero, we've got those 2 examples there about clean energy and storage. So, trying to have less harmful materials that are used in some of your solar cells or in batteries so that they offer cleaner and more sustainable energy and storage solutions. thinking about a circular economy in terms of how you can recycle waste so there's a net benefit. And of course, because Australia has a really strong focus on critical minerals and resources, also how can you maximise those processing, the ways that they're processed within Australia to again benefit their potential use for energy solutions for the future. Also thinking about healthy communities when we start thinking about drugs and medication solutions, vaccinations, but also devices. Some may be familiar with a particular art exhibit that was done a few years ago by Microscopy Australia called Stories and Structures. And so again, that's about trying to think about that Indigenous knowledge systems and understanding through art connected to science. So anyway, I won't go through all of them, but you can sort of see how we're trying to link some of these case studies using the images that, of course, we're very lucky to be able to use within the microscopy and imaging communities to then help demonstrate that message to funders, but also, you know, to the more general public as well. Another way that we think about this is when we are responding to roadmaps, we try and think about some of those technology areas and where they're going to make the most impact in terms of research and development. And we've also been doing some work within Australia. There's quite a strong focus on translation and innovation pathways. So there's a lot of talk within Australian government about technology readiness levels. And of course, these have got some histories back in NASA and getting to the moon. But this idea of linking between basic research all the way through to a sort of deployed and used routinely sort of pathway so that you get all of all of those, I guess, steps along the way, and trying to think about how research infrastructure can really enable that development. So one of the things that we have definitely tried to focus on is that how for imaging and microscopy, you really need that long-term support, and that quite often we'll be seeing projects that will sort of return in that sort of design, build, test and review phases and come through our facilities at sort of multiple points as they go through that scale-up process. So we have tried to think about some case studies and look, for time purposes, I won't go through each of them, but I might pick a couple where we try and, I guess, make it really clear to funders, to policymakers, to advocate for how we need to recognise that some of those connections between fundamental research or different pathways that things will come through that science process. So one of our favourite ones, and I mention it because, of course, it is also with our sister NCRIS project, the National Imaging Facility. That top one there in pink, Ferranova, is a company within Australia that's actually taking a polymerization method that was initially developed for use in paints, that is actually now being used to support nanoparticles that are being used for targeted clinical trials. And so this is one of those ones where a whole ecosystem was really critical between microscopy and imaging, as well as those clinical trials, to really maximise that translation opportunity. I might pick another one off of this second page as well, where again, it's about that long-term support that's been required, where the RNA-based bioclay it's an alternative to pesticides. It was back in about 2008, so a similar vintage to Microscopy Australia being established, where that research has been consistently supported since 2008. It's included industry partners, it's had some successful trials, it's had some research centres that have then looked to do and support that sort of product scale up. And so these are the types of stories that we try to collate to help people understand why you need to have that consistent long-term support. Again, I'm not going to go through each of these case studies, but just perhaps wanted to use them to illustrate how that challenge and research and impact structure is something that we've found really effective. It does give us the opportunity to showcase images or micrographs, or in this case, a reconstruction where you've got the cryo-EM that was really critical to them understanding the vaccines that are relevant for a range of different flaviviruses like dengue or Zika or West Nile disease. And so looking at ways that we can help people understand how that revealing that structure really does lead to those developments being possible. So of course, because of our varied backgrounds, we also look for ways to demonstrate those for materials. So this is looking at basically at 3D printing techniques. And so again, it was nationally significant research infrastructure, an atom probe instrument that was required to be able to do this identification within this titanium alloy. And similarly, sometimes, of course, it's also much more routine instruments. So in this case, it was a scanning electron microscope that was required, but it really allowed them to sort of monitor and develop the electrodes so that they could actually be looking at how they can support a sort of more carbon neutral processing for ammonia. So I'll move on a little bit to, I guess, the approach that we use in terms of thinking about our user pathways. And so there's probably two key tools that we've developed. If you don't know about them, I hope you might after today. One is called Technique Finder. So rather than providing access to a full instrument inventory, we try and help our researchers find the technique that they need. And then we also have MyScope that I mentioned before, which is really trying to provide that sort of initial theory and content for a range of different microscopy techniques, so that then our new users and researchers are coming into our facilities with a much stronger understanding of the techniques that they'll be using. So just to give you a couple of little quotes, you know, it's something about trying to make it a little bit more distilled and user friendly. And, you know, I guess a lot of the feedback that we get is that there isn't anything quite like it. Of course, there are some other great resources that Global Bioimaging has, of course, also collated through their training efforts. And we'll touch a little bit on that later. But one of the, I guess, things that it does do is it brings together both a theory, also a virtual instrument or a simulator that gives people the opportunity to play around with some parameters. And then it also does offer a quiz and a certificate, so that then it does make that difference in the facility, that can be a requirement before they'll commence that in-person training. As I said, it does have a range of techniques now. So there are 13 different modules that are available, with 8 of them having that virtual simulator. And look, I'll skip over this, but basically it's this idea that you get a virtual instrument and then also that theory and background as well. Some of those that we have added more recently is enlightened fluorescence, which includes some virtual instruments that run in single molecule localization mode as well as STED mode. So moving on to global bioimaging, so trying to think about how Microscopy Australia is now connected through global bioimaging and the opportunities and the initiatives that they have done. I've been incredibly fortunate over the last few years to have been involved in a leadership role within that global bioimaging management board, which again, global bioimaging is a consortium that brings together regional and national networks in bioimaging, you know, really for that collaboration and sharing of knowledge. So as I said, I've been fortunate enough to have been in the chair role of that management board over the last 12 months. And it's my real honour to be able to pass that over to Claire Brown from Canada, from McGill University, who will be the chair for the coming 12 months. So just without wanting to go through all the detail, I know there are a couple of presentations that are coming from the global bioimaging team, but I thought it was nice to just perhaps give some of my observations or experience from some of how I've been involved with global bioimaging. So I do think there are a range of activities. The exchange of experience is an annual conference that really does provide networking for imaging scientists and facility staff is, in my opinion, a really unique and incredibly supportive conference with a lot of practical as well as inspirational information that gets shared. There are a number of working groups that how I guess, those activities or those members can then connect outside of that exchange of experience, which quite often leads to international recommendation papers. So I'd really encourage everyone to go and have a look for those, because they do range from how to put training courses together, also thinking that we'll talk a little bit more about career pathways, but also social impact. And of course, the training program is one of those things that they've currently got support and able to offer a range of different training workshops, as well as job shadowing, which again I think is really unique. One of those parts for global bioimaging, of course, is the I think I've just frozen. There we go. I was looking for the map. Is the fact that global bioimaging is hosted at EMBL Heidelberg, and it does currently, just to recognise, although it was initially funded through Horizon funding within Europe, currently the support is through the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative and the Wellcome Trust. So looking at this global map, of course, there are still some sections that we'd love to see coloured in, but it is one of those delightful things that Australia was one of those founding partners, along with Euro-BioImaging, National Imaging Facility, and India Bioimaging. And so it's just wonderful to see so many more of those labels and sort of name tags now that have populated this map over the last few years, including some of that time that I've been there. So I did want to just briefly mention the National Imaging Facility. So that's also funded through the NCRIS program, like Microscopy Australia, and it's definitely got that focus on advanced human imaging and preclinical imaging. They've got a really strong focus on thinking about how they can set up national imaging data collections that would really enable some of those multi-site clinical trials to occur within Australia. A focus on radiopharmaceuticals, and of course then there's that kind of governance and central coordination activity as well. So how, I guess, have I worked with global bioimaging? So I've been fortunate enough to be Microscopy Australia's member on the Global Bioimaging Management Board since 2019. And as I said, I did serve as vice chair and then chair in recent history. You probably heard that I was pretty passionate about exchange of experience, although unfortunately a number of those were virtual attendees, as a virtual attendee, but certainly both the time that I went to Singapore as well as to South Africa really did cement some of that global networking and those connections for inspiration, as well as trying to identify opportunities for staff to connect with other great facilities. I have been, I guess, primarily involved in 3 of those working groups that I mentioned before. So there's a working group for career paths for imaging scientists. There's an impact of imaging infrastructures working group, and also training core facility imaging scientists. And I just wanted to briefly touch on each of those. The first one maybe that I was most involved in at the beginning was the impact working group. And so there was an international papers that was released, really did try and think about key performance indicators for core facilities in imaging, as well as what are some of the social economic indicators that would be relevant for facilities to collect. Then also looking for ways to share, like I have just done today, about your approach for case studies, how you think about communicating the impact of the research that is being enabled. Always being very careful to say this is not research that Microscopy Australia is leading, but really wanting to focus on the fact that it is facilitated or enabled by Microscopy Australia. And so there has also been some work about trying to look for some new case studies and mapping those research outcomes against the UN Sustainable Goals. And so this probably looks a little bit reminiscent of the approach we'd used with our national science and research priorities, but we did try and think similarly, and bonus points for anyone who can work out the one sustainable development goal that we didn't think we could claim as enabling research that would support each of those goals. We got to 16 out of the 17 due to that diverse nature of the work that is done through our microscopy facilities. So again, talked a little bit about the ways that we've used some of that branding, like Global Bioimaging does, to try and talk about impact and challenges, and really trying to distill down that message of how important microscopy is across a range of different application areas, whether that's in advanced manufacturing or, as we say, now with our new national science and research priorities. I'd like to just switch over now to the career paths working group, and I'm quite sure that probably Yara or someone there might be a little horrified. This is probably well outdated now. When we were originally setting up the career paths working groups, we had representatives from over 20 countries where we were really trying to think about how to share that experience of different staff across the globe, and try and think, how are they experiencing their careers, and what is it that at a global level we could do to advocate for those futures. And so I'm certainly very thankful in particular for Graham Wright and Yara, who really led a lot of that. And of course, that's now been, the baton has been passed on to some new chairs for that group. We did try and think about ways to sort of map various responsibilities that people have got within their groups. We looked at whether there was any regional differences as we put together the information that then led to things like looking for the top 5 career challenges. And again, please let me credit Yara and the Global Bioimaging team. I was there at the European Microscopy Conference last year, and this was one of the slides that we used, where there are some quotes here from different platform scientists about perhaps some of the ways they would describe the top 5 challenges that they experienced within their career. And so you can see that ranges from recognition or that position descriptions don't quite match their roles, that the impact of an imaging scientist position isn't always recognised. And I think what I really loved about this one is that I feel there was a lot of resonance within people, irrespective of where they came from, such that when we do reveal the countries that each of these quotes came from, you might have actually identified a quote that came from a very different region to your own, but actually that's why it does actually transcend your particular national or geographical region. Although there are definitely some additional challenges, particularly in some of those lower resourced countries and regions, about whether there's even approach to thinking about research infrastructure and how to even fund or coordinate that. And so, of course, one of the great works, one of the great achievements, I think, of that was of that international effort, was to then release another one of these recommendations papers about core facilities, career paths for imaging scientists. And that was also then published in a sort of a shorter form in the Journal of Microscopy last year. And so we've had a real push on trying to promote that importance and that visibility for imaging scientists over that last year period. And you'll see this is a bit of a summary. When we started to try and code them, it was a mismatch between the job they were doing and their position description did seem to come through as one of the strongest, sort of shared challenges across, but it did sort of pull out into those kind of top 5 of also, not maybe understanding the value of the roles, challenges regarding funding for roles, challenges regarding training and also talent, which was sort of both recruitment and retention. Just a shout out that if you don't know about the Imaging Spotlight series, they are available and there's been a really broad range, and they are recorded and available on the Global Bioimaging website. And similarly, I hope the QR code might work for you, or maybe this will also be shared again. But currently there is an authorship and acknowledgement of imaging core facility staff in terms of contributions in publications. And so I would definitely encourage you to share this so that, again, we can get some of that information internationally for what are some of the challenges of how people are being recognised in publications or not recognised in publications, either in terms of authorship or acknowledgement sections on publications. And that is just about helping to advocate for that recognition and visibility of our staff. So in Australia, one of the things that we do is we develop things like this that can be used as a desk top wallpaper or as a screensaver on computers that can then be varied or revised depending on which particular facility they're at. And of course, similarly, the RMS has also, the Royal Microscopical Society has also been working with Bioimaging UK to develop some facility guidelines. And I know Global Bioimaging is similarly trying to work on a version that could be jointly shared and promoted. So I do want to finish off with a couple of last thoughts on staff and career pathways. I do think one of the brilliant things about Global Bioimaging and Microscopy Australia has got a similar one. We call it staff shadowing. Global Bioimaging calls it job shadowing. This is really, though, one of those unique opportunities for staff that we really try and advocate and promote, not only for sort of senior leaders within facilities, but also for those who have really got an opportunity to take what their current knowledge, but perhaps extend it, particularly when there's, say, a new instrument or a new technique that will be coming into a facility, really trying to target another place, whether that is within Australia or internationally, for them to go and actually really learn and have some additional sort of demonstration and training time with another group. You know, we do find that exchange really does go both ways. It isn't a one-sided experience. And in fact, we've actually also now been working collaboratively with the Australian Microscopy and Microanalysis Society. That's that terrible acronym, AMS, AMMS, and Microscopy New Zealand, to try and think regionally how we can support some people, whether they're in one of our facilities or linked labs or outside. Look, for the sake of time, so that we do have an opportunity for some questions, I did want to just reflect that I think within Australia there are some great changes that are starting to happen in terms of greater visibility and awareness. And I do think things like that recommendations paper and journal articles and just general conversations have really started to sort of shift the dial and get people much more open to discussing where is it that people are sort of sitting and how to think about their career and their retention and how important they are to the research efforts within institutions. But I will, for the sake of time, just move forward. So there is a little bit of experience within Australia now of the technicians' commitment out of the UK. So the University of Sydney, which is the lead organisation for Microscopy Australia, has signed that. And so we're currently going through that process of, I guess, working out how to create some action plans, what could be the institution's role, what will be the sort of technicians for technicians that will feed into that. And of course, want to recognise that, you know, imaging scientists are really just one part of that broader technicians community. But that is something that I'm involved in at the University of Sydney. And also, there have been some working groups set up within Australia about skilled workforce and some of the issues and also a sort of new academy, a bit like a society for research infrastructure staff. So again, quite early days, but other avenues for advocacy and hopefully for progress too. So I wanted to finish off with just another two references, one to Founding Guide. So Founding Guide, a global image data ecosystem, and again, not stealing anyone's thunder, because I know there are presentations still to come, but I do see these as some of the broader international things that have been enabled through things like global bioimaging, where we start to try and think, what is it that we can do in terms of increasing our ability to have fair data, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable? How do we think about how to best support the community and end users in the approach that we have, so that metadata and data management is actually building that sustainability and interlinking right from the beginning. So this is something that we're really delighted to be involved in. It involves I think I've got that on the next slide. Obviously Europe, but also with Australia and Japan. And so I'm really excited to see where that's going to land over the next period. And of course, because I can't help a little plug for a couple of things happening in Australia, should you wish to leave your European surrounds and come and travel to the other end of the world. There is a Founding Guide event that will be running over 2 days in October in Brisbane. And then, and so you would be very welcome to come and participate and be a part of that conversation. There then will also be a Founding Guide community event that will be held in Europe in 2026. And that's the last one that I wanted to just finish on, which was training opportunities. And again, this is one of the real powerful things about global bioimaging. I didn't focus a lot on the exchange of experience, but they're annually. These training programs, I guess, can really respond and adapt to sort of local needs. And so within Australia, we just became, I guess, very aware that often our facility staff haven't necessarily had any explicit pedagogical training or teaching training. And so trying to bring together a group to think about the way they teach, how they teach. There's a difference between sort of force feeding and that knowledge, as well as what you're really trying to actually achieve is building that understanding. And so again, there are travel grants available. You will have to be pretty quick, because I believe applications are due both for travel grants and to attend the course by the 31st of March. So time is ticking. But definitely, we do think that the international flavours of some of these, if you can get here, really does add to the way that these training programs learn from a really broad cross-section of people. And I will leave it there. Thank you.